Hi, friends. In our time together today, we're revisiting a conversation about breath pressure in learning to play our whistles. Now, a few folks in the community have asked that we revisit this conversation, and I think it's important to do. And I'm really interested and anxious for those of you who are more experienced players to chime in with more comments in the notes to this video because our newer playing friends are going to look in those notes for wisdom from you. I'm making the video as a good conversation about this, but also as a conversation starter for all of us to help each other. You might be thinking, breath pressure, that's so basic. If you don't have a solid foundation for your playing, then you're not going to advance as a whistle playing musician. It's so important for us to regularly revisit those fundamental aspects of our playing. This is why scales are important. Scales force us to work on the fundamentals of tone quality, of finger dexterity, of hole coverage, playing all the notes well, of being able to play certain sequences. We run those scale exercises for that. And reminding ourselves about breath pressure is important as well. And as we get going, one of the things that I think is a foundational principle for being able to learn the breath pressure with which our whistle plays is hole coverage. I've got my Howard here, and if I'm not covering the holes well, it doesn't matter how I'm trying to learn breath pressure, I will not be successful because hole coverage is foundational for developing that skill. The other thing I need to say before sharing a couple of recommendations for learning to play the second octave is that this is also not just a foundational skill. This is a foundational element of whistles. You might think, low whistles. Not just low whistles. I'll explain that with a couple examples in a minute. But there are whistles that blow freely and easily. I've got the Caravev by Nightingale, and I had a bunch of whistles on that picture at the intro to the video, and that's because they're different examples. There are extremes. There are whistles that blow very easily, and that's not a bad thing, and it's not a good thing, but it might be a bad thing or a good thing for you personally. It's not a bad thing or a good thing about the whistle. It's a factor of the whistle, and that appeals to certain people. So the Nightingale, I could start on the second octave G and just play that easily. And then of the whistles I have, and I obviously need more whistles to give you more examples. But the MK Pro, as an example of something that requires a good bit more breath pressure, if I start on the second octave G, I'm going to have to think about it a bit. And I had to learn that. And then there are whistles in the middle. When I bought my Howard, this is my first whistle. Around the G, I need to learn a bit more breath pressure. And with the Howard, the breath pressure requires varies depending upon the head you purchase. That's interesting as well. The Chieftain V5 is more like the Nightingale by Caravev, but not quite as much. You have to learn some breath pressure, but it plays more freely. The Burke Viper requires you to learn moderate breath pressure. You have to learn that to play it well, but it's not going to be a breath pressure hog. And then the Carbony is similar to the Burke, maybe requiring a hair more breath pressure. And then you get into the conversation of, which one's a breath hog? And we had that whole conversation recently. So as not to revisit that, I'll link it here and at the end of this video. But in thinking about learning breath pressure, this is, again, foundational, very important conversation. I'm going to actually, I'll pick up my Howard for this. And what I want to do is to give you my first recommendation for learning the breath pressure your whistle requires of you to play it well. And don't think you do this once. You do this with every whistle you have. And I'm fascinated. I also one conversation down in the notes to this video. What are your easiest blowers? What are your hardest blowers? Because some of you know tons more about this because of the number of whistles you have. But my first recommendation is that you start playing your whistle and you play up the first octave, and then you start playing in the second octave. You keep your breath pressure consistent, and you stop playing where the note starts to deteriorate. Let me show you on the Howard. So I'll start at the low D. Okay? Because I play the Howard a lot. And so I automatically adjust my breath pressure based on where I am on the whistle. And so it's hard for me at this minute to leave my breath pressure consistent. So around the F sharp, it didn't really start to fall apart, but I could notice it. I could sense it. And on the G, it would have been more fragile. So what you do there is you maybe start at a note on the first octave, you start walking up, and then you start increasing your breath pressure just a little as you go, and you pay attention with each note and increase it as necessary. Because it's not just like, oh, this part of the last half of the second octave requires the first octave breath pressure times 2. It doesn't work that way. It changes per note often, and it changes per whistle. So I'm going to start on the I'll start on the C sharp. And what I'm doing is I'm increasing my breath pressure a little. Yes, I'm wearing my hearing protection today. So I went up to the third octave D, and I didn't find that a challenge. I don't find that a challenge now. When I bought the Howard, it was my very, very first whistle. Yes, my first whistle of any kind. Well, I had a really, really old Susato back when they were made from PVC, and I never played it. So this is really the first whistle I ever played. I could do that now, but when I first got the Howard, I learned to play the G sharp, and I had a hard time learning to play the A, B, C sharp, C natural, and the third octave D because I was learning breath pressure. So interesting. And then I borrowed Jonathan Chagall's Chieftain. We were chatting about that recently, and if I could just start on the Chieftain on the second octave G, no, let me walk up, sorry. The exercise, Scott. On the second octave A, I noticed some deterioration in the quality of the tone. So I need to increase my breath pressure a little. A little bit more on the B, a little bit more in the C sharp, and about the same on the third octave D. Now, I already played the caravan for you. You just play that up and down and not worry about it. The carbony, similarly, I'm going to start on the F sharp. So this is the practice. Well, to run through the practice. Walk up the whistle, notice breath pressure. I was modifying. I play the carbony so much too. Okay, around the A, between the G and the A, maybe start paying attention to the breath pressure. This is the big bore, low D, close finger spacing. The narrow bore requires less breath pressure attention. But the carbony was easier to figure out. And then you get to like the MK Pro. Now, I play the carbony, the Howard, a lot of my whistles I play a lot. The MK Pro I don't play quite as much because it's a louder whistle and I'm often inside. I love the tone of it though. None of these are bad whistles, they're great whistles. And that's why I talked about different whistles meeting different needs, different desires, different requirements. But as you learn your whistle, you have to learn this breath pressure thing. So on the MK Pro, the exercise goes. I was using the same breath pressure and the tone started to fall apart. It often falls apart for me if I'm running this exercise on the F sharp. But today it actually started falling apart because I was using lighter breath pressure to play the lower octave more mellow. And because I love the tone. It was on the second octave E. I noticed I had to increase it. With each of those notes, I'm having to increase my breath pressure just a little bit more. And so, You're doing that, and that's different with each whistle. So I'm taking a little extra time on this exercise to demonstrate how different this is on every whistle. This is so important to know. The Burke. I played the Burke enough too. That was automatically adjusting my air. It requires a bit more. It doesn't play as easily as the Nightingale by Karavev, but it plays very freely. This is another completely different conversation that I've had before, where there's a certain correlation between breath pressure, air requirement, and the ability to play expressively. I've talked about that before, and so I don't want to run down that rabbit hole because I'll keep you long enough. But remember I said this is not just a low whistle thing. I've got right here the Killarney high D. Didn't even have to change my breath pressure to go all the way up to the third octave D. A whistle built very, very similarly is the V6 by Thornton whistles. You'd think looking at it, except for the bore, that it was the same thing. Around the F sharp, the tone quality starts to fall apart and I've got to increase it. And I won't do that because you don't have your hearing protection in. Great whistle though. I'm not using any bad whistles for the example. I won't talk about that today. When I ordered from Roy McManus, he sent me an email. I've talked about this before. He said, "Are you sure you want one of my whistles?" because you've got to know how to play the second octave. It requires increased breath pressure. I'm increasing it. Okay, the A. No, often it's the G, but I play this enough too. Interestingly, just one more example on this. The Swain, beautiful whistle. Swain whistles, high D. You notice how the E is in the second octave started getting a little flat. I had to increase breath pressure, bring it into tone. It's not just being able to play it. It's tone quality in learning to play these second octave notes. And I'm increasing my breath pressure some. Another beautiful whistle. So many beautiful whistles in the world. So many whistles, so little time. Anyway, so that is that exercise. Again, the exercise is start, and I won't take that long with the second exercise, because I was trying to accomplish a lot more in that exercise in demonstrating the nature of varying whistles. When you're selecting a whistle, you're selecting a number of factors, one of them being the required breath pressure. And that varies from individual, and that often impacts tone and expressiveness, two also very important qualities in a whistle. So the exercise, start with just breath pressure for good tone in the lower octave, walk up the whistle, and don't increase your breath pressure. When you start to notice the tone degrading in some way, be it it's going flat, be it that it's starting to to break up, as it did there on the F sharp, walk back to that and increase your breath pressure as needed for each note. This is a great exercise. So helpful. Now, and I'll use the Howard still for the other exercise. These are things like scale exercises you run again and again and again and again, because what you want to do is to be able to pick your whistle up, and you just might want to go, sorry, I broke into a Christmas carol. I didn't know I was going to do that. Anyway, it's fun. So you want to practice this enough that you know your whistle. Practice your whistle so that you could just play a second octave note and not worry about it. So anyway, the second exercise. I'll be a lot quicker with this one. The second exercise is an octave jump exercise. I think both of these are helpful, and they're teaching you different things about playing the second octave. So it's not a pick and choose, it's a both and. Try both of these. And I really want you more experienced players, tell us your favorite. Learn the second octave exercises. So with this one, what you're going to do is you're going to start off on the low D, and you're going to play the high D, maintain your breath pressure, and just pick up your index finger. You may need to focus your air, and I've not really talked about, I have talked about this in other videos. Sometimes it's a matter of, maybe, I hate to talk embouchure with a whistle because I've got other woodwind players, and embouchure means something different to those of us who play saxophone, clarinet, or those of you who play the flute. So maybe narrow your airway a little sometimes to increase breath pressure. If you want a more gentle breath pressure, you can narrow your lips, purse them a little bit, and just push a little harder through them. That helps moderate gentle breath pressure differences. Anyway, so you play the first octave note and then jump to the second octave note. Then on the E, you're going to increase breath pressure enough to make the octave jump. You could do it gradually and pay attention to when it jumps. It sounded like I just transitioned into it, and with a little harmonics in between. And I did, because I just increased my breath pressure so that now I can make a more consistent change. This is important as well, because there are times like Jonathan talked about in a recent video where you're doing those octave jumps, and it's important to know how to do that. The F sharp, increase your breath pressure slowly so that you learn where it breaks, and then you could do it more quickly like I just did, but I'll do it more slowly on the G. Now you're also learning the volume range of your whistle, because as you blow harder, you're getting a different volume. Notice on the A how much volume range I had there, but it started to lose tone quality and then it jumped. So that you can now B, C sharp. It's a little harder because of the fingering on the C sharp. Drop your bottom 3 fingers and just push harder and see where that push needs to be. And then the third octave D. Start on the second octave D. And so you're learning those ranges. And then you could just run that. And so that's the second exercise. Use both of these. Now, so I said I'd share a little trick that'll be helpful. Sometimes when you're playing a tune, you've got to do, like Jonathan talked about, an octave jump. And you don't want it to sound that bad. You want it to be cleaner. What you do is you can ornament the entry to the higher note. Like sometimes I'll do that same octave jump on the G to the G, and you could just slide to it. And so I'm using the F sharp, doing a bit of a slide. You could do a slower slide than what I did. You can, a really fun slide's a double finger lift up. That's too long. I didn't like that one. I wouldn't use that. You could slide. You could add another ornament. A little cut as the entry, and then that actually gives you the opportunity to do the breath pressure. A lot depends on the tune. How do I want to enter that? Is this a quick tune where I want it punchy? Is this an emotive tune where I want to slide? You could, another fun thing, you could pause and just enter that other note and then use a pause. A pause can be treated as an ornament, so that's a good thing. Or a strong tongue. And then that helps. These are helpful things. So the two ways, just the two I'm sharing here, and use both, is walk up the whistle paying attention to breath pressure, and then use that to learn the second octave. Time. It takes time. And do the octave jumps. And it's going to take time for you to learn a whistle. You get a brand new whistle, guess what? You'll be quicker doing it because you now understand breath pressure doing it, but it's still so helpful. And then the trick is, if you're doing note jumps, or if you're playing a really high note that's a bit of a challenge for you, ornament your way into it, and make that easier, and everybody will think you're great. So Well, maybe they'll know what you're doing. But it's fun. It makes it easier. Make it easier on yourself. These are, again, foundational exercises for us. These are still things I do. Every time I get a new whistle, I do these exercises to learn the second octave. I can learn it faster now because I've gone through it the first time. I hope this is helpful, my friends. If so, please like the video. If you're an experienced player and you're with me this long in the video, thank you so much. Comment. I want to hear your recommendations because we're building a resource together of information about how to learn our whistles. If you're brand new and just checking us out, please subscribe. I'd love to welcome you into our great community of folks learning the whistle together. Until next time, this is Scott Shade. Happy whistling, my friends.